My name is Margaret Hayes, I'm 78 years old, and for most of my life, I've been known as the sweetest grandmother in our small town. I baked pies for every church gathering, raised my kids alone after my husband passed away, and even taught my children the art of cooking from scratch. To the world, we were the picture of a loving family. But behind closed doors, love turned sour when greed took root. I never thought the same hands I once held to teach the value of life would one day try to take mine for money. It happened on a rainy evening, the kind where the sound of the drops on the roof feels like whispers of warning. I was sitting at my kitchen table, sipping tea, when I heard them. My son, Robert, and my daughter, Linda, were in the next room, voices low but clear enough for me to catch every word. "If we add just a bit of it, she'll never know," Linda hissed. Robert chuckled coldly. "She taught us well, didn't she? How ironic that her own recipes will be the reason she never wakes up." Froze. My hands trembled as I clutched my teacup. My own children plotting to poison me. They mentioned the inheritance, the house, the money I had saved. My heart shattered into pieces. Every sacrifice, every sleepless night working to give them a better life, had led to this moment of betrayal. I wanted to burst into the room and confront them right there, but I didn't. I stayed silent, invisible, while my mind raced. They thought I was weak, old, and ready to die. They forgot one thing. I'm the one who taught them everything they know about cooking, and I'm still the one step ahead of them. That night I pretended to go to bed early, but instead I stayed awake, listening to every creak and whisper in the house. Around midnight, I heard Robert opening the kitchen drawer where I kept my spices. He was careful, too careful. Then Linda's voice followed, urging him to hurry before I woke up. I quietly slipped out of my bed and moved like a shadow. The old wooden floor betrayed me with a creak, but they didn't hear. I watched them from the hallway, my eyes burning as I saw my own children stirring something into the soup I had made earlier. They were using my recipes, my kitchen, my love, twisting it into murder. When they finally left the kitchen, smug and satisfied, I walked in and looked at the pot. The smell was slightly off, faint but unmistakable to someone with decades of experience. They must have thought they were clever, but they underestimated my senses. I stirred the soup slowly, staring into its surface like it was reflecting the betrayal itself. Then an idea, dangerous, cold, and clever, slid into my mind. I wasn't going to run. I wasn't going to call the police.
Well,
I was going to teach them the most unforgettable lesson of their lives. They wanted me dead for the inheritance. I'd give them something to choke on. The next morning, I smiled at them as if nothing had happened. Linda handed me the poisoned soup, her hands trembling slightly, her eyes darting nervously to Robert. I took the bowl, lifted the spoon, and just before it touched my lips, I said softly, "You know, the secret to my recipes isn't in the ingredients. It's in knowing every single detail of what goes in." Their faces paled, but I still took a sip. They watched, wide-eyed, waiting for me to fall. I swallowed slowly, looking straight into their eyes, and whispered, "Delicious." But what they didn't know, I had already switched the bowls when they weren't looking. As they sat down to eat their portions, smirking, thinking I was minutes away from my end, I waited, and waited, until Robert's smirk twisted into a grimace. Linda's hand clutched her throat. Panic filled their eyes as they realized something was very, very wrong. I leaned back, calm as ever, and said, "You forgot who taught you how to cook." The room erupted into chaos as they struggled to breathe, but I wasn't finished yet. I had only just begun. Because that night, after they collapsed to the floor, gasping for air, I made a call that would change everything. But to who? You'll find out in the next chapter. If you're hooked by this story and want to know how I turned their plan upside down, stay tuned for the next chapter. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, because you won't believe what happens next. The phone felt heavy in my hand as I dialed the number. My heart pounded, not from fear, but from the adrenaline rushing through my veins. The line clicked, and a familiar voice answered. "Margaret, is everything all right?" It was Detective Allen, an old family friend who had once helped me when my late husband's business was tangled in a legal mess. I took a deep breath and said in a trembling but steady tone, "Alan, I need you to come to my house. And don't let anyone know." Minutes later, I heard the sound of tires screeching outside my home. When Alan walked in, he froze at the sight of Robert and Linda lying on the floor, groaning and barely conscious. His eyes darted to me. "Margaret, what happened here?" I gave him a look that said everything. "They tried to kill me. But they forgot I'm still alive for a reason." As he checked on them, I explained everything. How I overheard their plan, how they laced my food, and how I switched the bowls. I even handed him the evidence. The vial they had tried to hide. Alan shook his head in disbelief. "Your own children," he muttered. "Margaret, this is attempted murder." I thought it would be over once the ambulance came and took them away, but deep down, I knew this was just the beginning. As the paramedics wheeled my children out, they glared at me with a mixture of hatred and fear. I couldn't tell if they were more angry at being caught or at failing to kill me. That night my house was empty. The silence was deafening. I sat at the kitchen table where everything had started, staring at the wooden chair my children once fought over as kids. Memories flooded in. Birthdays, laughter, late-night dinners. How had it come to this? I thought about the inheritance they were so desperate for. All those years of saving, investing, and sacrificing had become the very reason they wanted me gone. A part of me wanted to rip up the will and leave them with nothing. But another part wanted to teach them, in the most painful way, the value of what they had lost. The next morning I went to the lawyer's office. Mr. Johnson, an old man with kind eyes, looked at me in shock when I told him what had happened. "Margaret, you can disinherit them entirely. They don't deserve a cent." But I shook my head. "Not yet. Have a plan. One they'll never see coming." While my children were recovering in custody under police supervision, I began making quiet moves. I rewrote my will, not to remove them completely, but to attach conditions they would never expect. If they wanted my inheritance, they would have to follow every single rule I set. And these weren't easy rules. Days turned into weeks, and when they were released on bail, they came back to me, not with apologies but with fake smiles and sweet words. "Mom, we were just confused. We didn't mean it." Their lies were bitter, but I played along. I welcomed them back into my house, acting like the frail, forgiving mother they thought I was. But every day, I tightened the strings of my plan. I made them cook for me, clean for me, and follow my every instruction. They thought they were earning back my trust, but really, they were digging themselves deeper into the trap I had set. The tension grew day by day. One wrong move, one slip of the tongue, and I'd catch them glaring at me like vultures circling their prey. They were planning something else, I could feel it. And then, one night, I found something under Robert's bed. A small bottle, hidden in a box. My blood ran cold. They hadn't given up. They were planning to try again. But this time they wouldn't get a second chance. Because I had already set something in motion they couldn't escape from. What was it? You'll find out in the next chapter. If this story has you on the edge of your seat, don't miss the next chapter. Like, comment, and subscribe to follow this journey to the shocking end. I held the small bottle between my fingers, staring at it under the dim light of my bedroom lamp. The liquid inside was clear, almost innocent looking, but I knew better. My children were relentless. They were willing to try again, despite the last time nearly costing them their lives and freedom. A storm brewed inside me, not of fear but of determination. They thought I was too old, too fragile to fight back. They thought they could outsmart the woman who had raised them. They were wrong. I placed the bottle back exactly where I found it, not because I was careless, but because I wanted them to believe I hadn't noticed. The next morning, I cooked breakfast as if nothing had happened. Pancakes, bacon, and eggs filled the air with a comforting smell. Robert and Linda came downstairs, acting like obedient children. "Good morning, Mom," Linda chirped, her voice dripping with fake sweetness. "Morning," I replied with a warm smile that masked the storm in my heart. I watched them eat while sipping my tea. Every bite they took was a lie, every smile a dagger. But I stayed calm, pretending to trust them again. Inside, I was calculating my next move. They weren't the only ones who could play this game. Later that day, I paid a visit to Detective Allen. He raised an eyebrow when I told him they were plotting again. "Margaret, this is getting dangerous. You can't keep them in your house." "I know exactly what I'm doing," I said firmly. "They think they're in control, but I'm 10 steps ahead." Allen sighed but nodded. "All right, but be careful. Don't underestimate them." I didn't plan to. When I returned home, I began preparing a special dinner. I seasoned the meat, stirred the soup, and baked fresh bread, just like old times. Robert and Linda hovered around the kitchen, whispering to each other when they thought I wasn't looking. As we sat down to eat, I could see the anticipation in their eyes. They were waiting for the moment to strike, waiting for me to drop my guard. They didn't know I had already switched everything they touched with something harmless, except for their own plates. Halfway through the meal, Linda's face turned pale. Robert's fork clattered to the floor. They exchanged panicked looks, and I calmly sipped my wine. "What's wrong?" asked sweetly. Linda's hand shook. What did you do?" I leaned forward, my voice low and steady. "I simply let you taste your own medicine." They gasped, clutching their stomachs, but I knew they wouldn't die. I hadn't poisoned them. Instead, I had added a strong laxative, a reminder that I was still the one in control, the one who decided who lived comfortably under my roof. As they ran to the bathroom in agony, I locked the kitchen door behind me. My heart pounded, but there was a strange satisfaction in watching them squirm, not from cruelty, but from justice. That night, I sat in my room and wrote in my journal, documenting every detail. If anything happened to me, the world would know the truth. I also sent a copy to my lawyer, sealing my safety. But as I lay in bed, I couldn't shake the feeling that this war wasn't over. My children weren't done. They were wounded, humiliated, and desperate. Desperate people do dangerous things. The next morning, I woke to find my front door wide open. The kitchen was a mess, and my phone was missing. They had made their move. But so had I. Because I had already called someone they feared even more than me. Who was it? You'll find out in the next chapter. This story is only heating up. If you're ready to see how I turn the tables on my own children, stay tuned. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, because the next twist will leave you speechless. The wind howled through the open front door, carrying with it a chill that cut deep into my bones. I stood there, staring at the chaos in my living room. Drawers were pulled out, papers scattered across the floor, and the picture frames of my late husband shattered into pieces. My heart clenched, not from fear but from rage. This was no random act. This was a message. Robert and Linda had made it clear. If I didn't give them what they wanted, they would take it by force. But they underestimated me again. The woman they thought they could intimidate had survived far worse in her life. I closed the door slowly, locking it behind me. My hands trembled slightly, not because I was afraid, but because I was boiling with emotions I hadn't felt in years. I sat down in the armchair, taking deep breaths. My eyes fell on my old phone sitting on the side table, the backup phone they didn't know about. I picked it up and dialed a number I hadn't used in years. "Margaret." The voice on the other end was deep, steady, and familiar. "Tom," I said, my voice calm but laced with steel. "It's time." Tom was my nephew, a former Marine who owed me his life after I raised him when his parents abandoned him. He had moved out of state years ago, but one promise he made never changed. "If you ever need me, I'll come." Within hours, Tom was at my doorstep. Tall, strong, with a gaze that could pierce through lies. He walked into the house and took one look at me. "Who did this?" "My children," I said simply. "They want me gone." His jaw tightened. "Not on my watch." That night, as rain battered against the windows, we formulated a plan. Tom installed security cameras around the house, replaced the locks, and set up alarms. I felt safer knowing someone strong was by my side, but I also knew this wasn't just about protection. This was about exposing my children for what they truly were. The next day, Robert and Linda returned, pretending to be concerned. "Mom, are you okay?" "We heard something happened," Robert said with false innocence. I smiled faintly. "Oh, I'm fine. Just fine. Why don't you come in?" Tom stood silently in the corner, arms crossed, glaring at them like a predator watching its prey. Robert and Linda froze when they saw him. "Who's this?" Linda asked nervously. "My nephew," I replied calmly. "He's here to help me around the house." They exchanged uneasy glances. Their plan was crumbling and they knew it. But instead of backing down, they tried to charm me again, offering to cook dinner that night. I agreed, keeping my face neutral, but inside I was laughing. As they cooked, Tom and I watched the cameras in the other room. We saw Robert slip something into the sauce when he thought no one was looking. I clenched my fists. Tom whispered, "Want me to stop them?" I shook my head. "Not yet." We let them serve the meal. They sat there, smiling as if they had already won. I lifted my fork slowly, twirling the pasta, and took a small bite while they watched. Then I set the fork down and smiled. "You know," I said softly, "it's amazing how you two keep trying the same tricks over and over. But here's the thing. You'll never succeed, because I've been playing this game much longer than you." Their smiles faded. Robert's hand twitched. Linda swallowed hard. Tom stepped forward, pulling out a small recorder from his pocket. He pressed play, and their whispers from the kitchen filled the room. "Just a little more poison this time. She won't survive it." Their faces drained of color. "You recorded us," Linda stammered. Tom smirked. "We recorded everything." Before they could react, the front door burst open, and Detective Allen walked in with 2 officers. He had been listening to the live feed the entire time. "Robert Hayes, Linda Hayes," Allen said sternly. "You're under arrest for attempted murder." As the officers handcuffed them, Robert shouted, "You can't do this. You're our mother. You can't." I stood up slowly, my voice cutting through the chaos like a knife. "You stopped being my children the moment you decided my death was worth more than my love." They were dragged out, screaming and cursing as rain poured outside. I watched them go, my heart heavy but strong. This wasn't the end. I knew they would try to twist things in court, to make me look like the villain. But I had evidence, witnesses, and most importantly, I had the strength they thought I had lost. That night, as I sat by the fire with Tom, I felt a strange sense of peace. The house was quiet, safe for the first time in months. But deep down, I knew this wasn't over. Robert and Linda weren't the type to give up so easily. They would find a way to retaliate. And I would be ready. The next morning, I found a note slipped under my door. It was wet from the rain, but the message was clear. "This isn't over. We'll finish what we started." I stared at the note, my hands steady. They wanted war. They'd get it. Because I had one final card to play. And when I used it, there would be no coming back for them. What was my final move? You'll find out in the next chapter. If this story has you hooked, you won't want to miss what comes next. Like, comment, and subscribe, because the next chapter will show just how far a mother can go when her children push her too far. The note burned in my hand as I read it again and again. "This isn't over. We'll finish what we started." The handwriting was unmistakably Robert's. My children were not just bitter. They were dangerous, even with the law closing in on them. I knew they would come back, and I refused to be caught off guard again. The first thing I did that morning was drive to my lawyer's office with Tom by my side. I handed Mr. Johnson the note. His eyebrows knitted together as he read it. "Margaret, this is direct evidence of a threat," he said. "We can use this in court to ensure they stay behind bars." But I shook my head. "They'll find a way out. They always do. This isn't about just winning in court, Johnson. This is about ending this cycle once and for all." I could see in his eyes he wanted to protest, but he knew my mind was made up. He finalized the revisions to my will, sealing them in a safe deposit box. Under the new terms, if anything happened to me, the inheritance would bypass Robert and Linda completely, going straight to a charity in my late husband's name. My children's greed would lead them to nothing but ashes. Back at home, I prepared my next move. I reached out to a few old friends, people I had helped over the years, people who owed me favors. I told them only what they needed to know, that I was in danger and needed their support. Within a day, I had a network of eyes watching every corner of my neighborhood. Meanwhile, Tom stayed by my side, patrolling the house like a guardian. "You know they'll try something soon," he said one night as we drank tea by the fire. "I'm counting on it," I replied, my voice firm. The days passed quietly, almost too quietly. It was the calm before the storm. Then, one evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, we heard a noise at the back door. Tom reached for his gun, and I grabbed the pepper spray I kept hidden in my pocket. We moved silently toward the sound. The back door creaked open. Two shadows slipped inside. They thought they were sneaky, but every step they took was caught on the cameras Tom had installed. The lights suddenly flickered on, and there they were, Robert and Linda, faces twisted with desperation. Robert lunged toward me, but Tom was faster, pinning him against the wall. Linda screamed, swinging a kitchen knife, but I stood firm, staring at her with a calmness that unnerved her. "Put it down, Linda," I said softly. "This isn't who you are." But she shook her head, tears streaming down her face. "You made us this way. You and your stupid money." Tom restrained her, and I stepped closer. "No, Linda. You made yourselves this way. Gave you love. You chose greed." The police arrived within minutes, sirens piercing the night. Detective Allen stormed in, and the moment he saw them, he ordered his officers to take them into custody. "This time," he said firmly, "they won't see daylight for a long time." As they were dragged out, Robert screamed, "We'll get you for this. You'll see." I stood in the doorway, my heart pounding but steady. "No, Robert. You'll only see the inside of a cell." That night, I sat in the kitchen, staring at the pot of tea I had made. My hands trembled, not from fear, but from the weight of everything that had happened. My children were gone, but the scars they left would never fully heal. Tom put a hand on my shoulder. "You're safe now, Aunt Margaret." I nodded, but deep down I knew safety was temporary. People like Robert and Linda don't stop. They plot, they wait, they strike again when least expected. And I was right. 2 weeks later, a mysterious car began parking across the street at night. Strange calls came to my house with no voice on the other end. I knew it was them or someone working for them. They were still coming for me. But I wasn't the same woman I had been when this began. I was stronger, sharper, and ready to end this once and for all. The question was, how far would I have to go to finally be free? The answer was coming soon. Because I had decided to take the fight to them. Where would I go? What would I do? You'll find out in the next chapter. If this story keeps you on edge, don't move a muscle. The next chapter will reveal a move so bold, so unexpected, that it will change everything. Like, comment, and subscribe, because the storm isn't over yet. The decision came to me in the middle of the night. I was sitting at the edge of my bed, staring at the moonlight spilling across the floor. My children had crossed every line. They weren't just a threat. They were a storm that would never stop unless I ended it myself. I wasn't going to wait for them to come knocking again. This time I would bring the battle to them. The next morning I packed a small bag with essentials, documents, a hidden recorder, and a burner phone Tom had given me. I dressed simply, in a way that wouldn't draw attention, and slipped out of the house while Tom prepared the car. "Are you sure about this?" he asked as he placed my bag in the trunk. "Yes," I said firmly. "If I don't confront them, they'll keep coming. They need to know they can't break me." We drove to the city where Robert and Linda were staying out on bail. Their apartment building was grim, tucked between abandoned shops and flickering streetlights. I could feel my heart pounding as we parked across the street. Tom frowned. "We should wait for Alan. This is dangerous." I shook my head. I raised them. I have to face them. We climbed the narrow stairwell to their apartment. The door was slightly ajar, voices seeping through the crack. I motioned for Tom to stay quiet as I slowly pushed the door open. Inside, I saw my children hunched over a table covered with papers, bottles, and what looked like forged documents. "Once she's gone, the house is ours," Robert was saying. Linda laughed bitterly. "She's old. One push down the stairs, and no one will question it." Cold rage burned in me. I stepped inside, my voice steady. "Planning my funeral already." They froze. Robert's eyes widened. Linda dropped the pen she was holding. How did you get in here?" Robert stammered. "I taught you to lock the door, remember?" I said coldly. Before they could react, Tom stepped in behind me, his presence towering and threatening. "You've gone too far," I continued, walking toward them. "You think you can scare me? You think you can erase me? No, Robert. No, Linda. I'm the storm you can't outrun." Robert lunged at me, but Tom intercepted him, slamming him against the wall. Linda grabbed a glass bottle and charged, but I stood my ground, my eyes never leaving hers. "Go ahead, Linda. Strike me. See if it makes you feel alive." She froze, trembling, and the bottle slipped from her hand, shattering on the floor. At that moment, Detective Allen burst through the door with 2 officers. He had been following us the entire time. "Caught you in the act," Allen said, pulling out his badge. "Forgery, conspiracy to commit murder. You're finished." The officers cuffed Robert and Linda as they screamed and cursed. "You'll regret this, Mom," Robert shouted, his voice shaking with fury. I stood tall, my heart pounding but steady. "No, Robert. The only regret here is yours." As they were dragged out, Allen turned to me. "You shouldn't have come here alone, Margaret. It was risky." I smiled faintly. Sometimes you have to take risks to end what should have ended long ago. That night, as Tom drove me home, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. But even as we reached my house, I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't finished. People like Robert and Linda, they cling to their hatred. When I opened my door, my suspicion was confirmed. The lights were already on. On my dining table was a single envelope with my name on it. My heart sank as I opened it. Inside was a photo of me, taken through my bedroom window. On the back, a message was scrawled in bold letters. "We're not done. Not until you're gone." The walls of my home suddenly felt cold, almost suffocating. My own children were becoming something darker than I ever imagined. This wasn't just about inheritance anymore. This was war. And I was prepared to win. Because I had one last trap to set, one so deadly clever that it would end this nightmare forever. What was my final trap? You'll find out in the next chapter. This story is reaching its breaking point. If you think you've seen the worst, wait until you see what comes next. Like, comment, and subscribe, because the next chapter will shock you to your core. The photo in my hands trembled slightly as I held it to the light. Someone had been inside my yard, close enough to my bedroom window to take this shot. This was no longer just a threat, it was a declaration of war. Robert and Linda were no longer thinking like my children. They were thinking like predators. And predators don't stop until they've either caught their prey, or been put down. Tom paced the room, his jaw tight. "They're escalating. This isn't just harassment. This is stalking." "I know," I said quietly, placing the photo back on the table. "And that means they're desperate. Desperate people make mistakes." He looked at me. "So what's your plan?" I met his gaze with the same steel that had carried me through years of hardship. "We're going to let them think they've won." That night, I began setting my final trap. Every step was calculated. The cameras were adjusted to capture every angle, locks were set to lure them in easily, and the kitchen, their chosen battlefield, was arranged to tell a story they wouldn't see coming. On the surface, it looked like I had grown careless. In reality, every corner of my house was rigged with silent alarms and hidden cameras streaming directly to Detective Allen's office. The next morning, I spread a rumor through a mutual acquaintance that I had taken my will out of the lawyer's safe and brought it home. I even made sure they would hear me accidentally, telling Tom I was too tired to set the alarms that night. Tom raised an eyebrow when I told him the plan. "You're baiting them." "Yes," I said firmly. "They want the will. They'll come for it. And when they do, they'll be caught. Hours passed. The sun went down, and with it came the silence of a night waiting to explode. I sat in my chair by the fire, pretending to doze off, while Tom hid in the shadows upstairs with a camera. The house was dimly lit, casting long, eerie shadows across the walls. Every creak in the wood made my heart skip, but I stayed still, calm and ready. Then I heard it. The back door slowly clicked open. Robert's silhouette crept through first, followed by Linda, both wearing dark clothes and gloves. They moved like thieves, scanning the room for me. "There she is," Linda whispered, pointing at my still figure in the chair. Robert grinned coldly. "This is it." They crept closer, one holding a knife, the other clutching a pillow. My heart pounded, but I didn't move. I waited until they were inches away before I spoke. "Looking for this." Their eyes went wide as I held up the fake will I had placed on my lap. The room erupted into chaos. Tom burst from the shadows, camera flashing, recording everything. Robert lunged at him, but Tom tackled him to the ground. Linda screamed and ran for the door, but it slammed open before she could reach it. Detective Allen stood there with two officers, guns drawn. "You're done," Allen barked. The officers moved swiftly, cuffing both Robert and Linda as they shouted, cursed, and tried to twist free. But there was no escape. Every camera, every recording captured their intent clearly. They had come to kill me. As they were dragged out, Robert spat on the floor. "You think this is over? You'll regret this, old woman." I stood slowly, walking toward him with the calmness of someone who had already won. "No, Robert. The only thing you'll regret is losing the only mother who ever loved you." The door slammed behind them, and for the first time in months, the house was quiet again. I collapsed into my chair, tears streaming down my face. Not from fear, but from the grief of losing the children I once knew. They were gone long before tonight. Tom knelt beside me, placing a comforting hand on my shoulder. "It's over, Aunt Margaret." But I shook my head. "No. Not until the court makes it final." The following week the trial began. Every detail, every recording, every piece of evidence painted the truth. They had plotted to kill their mother for money. I sat in the courtroom, strong and unyielding, while they glared at me with venom in their eyes. As the judge prepared to read the verdict, I held my breath. The gavel came down. "Guilty." Robert and Linda screamed as they were sentenced to years in prison. I sat quietly, my hands clasped, a tear rolling down my cheek, not out of sadness but out of closure. But just as I began to believe the nightmare was over, something unexpected happened. A stranger approached me outside the courthouse. He was tall, wearing a dark coat, and his face was hidden by a cap. He slipped a note into my hand and walked away without a word. I opened it slowly. "You've won the battle. But the war isn't over. They have friends." My knees went weak. The shadow of danger still loomed. What new enemy was waiting in the dark? You'll find out in the next chapter. This story isn't slowing down. It's about to explode. If you're ready for the next shocking twist, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, because the storm ahead is darker than ever. The words on the note chilled me more than any threat Robert or Linda had ever spoken. They have friends. Who were these people? What did they want? My mind raced as I stood frozen outside the courthouse. Tom rushed to my side, snatching the note from my hand. His face hardened. "This isn't over," he muttered. "No, it isn't," I whispered. "And we can't afford to be caught off guard again." For weeks, life settled into a strange calm. My children were locked away, but the threat lingered like a storm cloud hanging over my head. Tom stayed with me, refusing to let me be alone. Detective Allen arranged for occasional patrols around my house, but deep down, I knew whoever had sent that note was smart enough to work around the law. The first sign came one evening. Tom and I were having dinner when the lights suddenly went out. A blackout in the neighborhood. Tom grabbed a flashlight while I stayed perfectly still, my senses heightened. Through the darkness I heard it, the crunch of footsteps outside. Tom whispered, "Stay here," but I grabbed his arm. No, we faced this together. We moved quietly to the window. Two figures stood by my gate, one on the phone, the other scanning the house with something glinting in his hand. Crowbar. My heart pounded. These weren't random intruders. These were the friends the note warned about. Before they could break in, I triggered the silent alarm hidden under the kitchen counter. Minutes later, red and blue lights lit up the night as police cars screeched to a stop. The intruders bolted, disappearing into the trees before the officers could catch them. Detective Allen arrived, breathless. Margaret, they're professionals. Whoever's backing your children is organized. This isn't just about greed anymore. Someone wants you gone. My stomach churned. Was it a criminal group? Some shady friends Robert had gotten involved with. Whatever it was, I had to outsmart them just like I had outsmarted my children. The next day, I called Mr. Johnson, my lawyer, and moved all my assets into a trust they couldn't touch. I also changed my will again, sealing it under the strictest legal protections. If anyone wanted my fortune, they would have to go through a fortress of law. But legal walls weren't enough. I needed to send a message. So I planned something bold, an event that would draw them out. I organized a public charity gala in my late husband's honor, inviting half the town, including the media. The event would be held in my house with cameras everywhere. It was the perfect bait. Tom was nervous. You're walking into a trap yourself. No, I said firmly. I'm setting the trap. The night of the gala arrived. My house glowed with lights, laughter filled the air, and I stood at the center, calm and composed. Cameras flashed as I gave a heartfelt speech about resilience and family. But my eyes constantly scanned the crowd, searching for danger. Then I saw him. A man in a dark suit, lurking near the back, watching me too intently. He wasn't on the guest list. He moved like a predator, waiting for the right moment. As the night progressed, I slipped away into the kitchen, knowing he would follow. Sure enough, footsteps echoed behind me. I turned slowly, facing him. You're not here for the charity, are you? I asked coldly. He smirked. You're clever, old woman. But not clever enough. You should have died when you had the chance. Before he could step closer, Tom burst in, tackling him to the ground. Guests screamed as the commotion spilled into the main hall. Detective Allen, who had been hiding in plain sight among the crowd, rushed forward with officers and handcuffed the man. Under interrogation, he confessed he had been sent to finish what Robert and Linda started, and that they had allies outside prison willing to do anything for money. The threat was real, but now we had a name, a network of criminals connected to my children. Allen promised to dismantle it piece by piece. That night, as the guests left and silence returned, I stood on my porch staring at the stars. I should have felt relieved, but instead, I felt a storm brewing deep in my soul. This wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about ending this chain of evil once and for all. And I knew exactly how I was going to do it. Because the final battle was coming, and when it arrived, there would be no second chances. What was my ultimate plan to end this war? You'll find out in the next chapter. The climax is near, and the next chapter will leave you breathless. If you followed me this far, stay with me, like, comment and subscribe because the endgame begins now. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in my rocking chair, staring into the darkness, every creak of the house sounding like a whisper of what was to come. The pieces were all on the board now. My children behind bars, their allies lurking in the shadows, and me, an old woman they thought they could break. They didn't realize they had turned me into something far more dangerous than they imagined. I was no longer just their mother. I was their reckoning. The next morning, I made the call that would set everything in motion. Detective Allen answered on the first ring. It's time, I said simply. He didn't question me. I'll have my team ready. Meanwhile, Tom and I prepared the house for the final showdown. Cameras were checked, security reinforced, and every corner of the property became part of my plan. I left bait where I knew they would look. Documents that appeared valuable, a fake key to a hidden safe, and an envelope labeled inheritance. The truth was, none of it mattered. The real trap was the house itself. That evening I received a call from an unknown number. A male voice growled through the line. "You think you've won, old woman? Tonight we finish this. You can't stop us." I smiled coldly, gripping the phone tight. "Come. I'll be waiting." Hours later, the night swallowed the town in silence. Tom stood guard upstairs while I sat in the living room, lights dimmed, waiting. My heart pounded with anticipation, but my hands were steady. Then it happened. The gate rattled. Shadows crept across the lawn. I heard the back door click open. Two men slipped in, moving like snakes in the dark. They searched quickly, heading straight to the fake envelope I had left on the dining table. As soon as one of them grabbed it, a blinding light flooded the room. The cameras hidden in the corners lit up, sending the live feed directly to Detective Allen, who was waiting nearby with a SWAT team. "Got you," I whispered. The men panicked, realizing they were exposed. One lunged toward me, knife glinting in the light. But before he reached me, Tom tackled him to the ground. The second man tried to flee, only to be met by Allen and his officers bursting through the front door. It was chaos, shouts, the clash of bodies, the thud of boots on the floor. But within minutes it was over. Both attackers were on the ground, handcuffed, furious and defeated. Allen looked at me with a mixture of admiration and concern. "Margaret, you could have been killed." I stood tall, my voice steady. "I could have, but I wasn't. Because I know how to fight for what's mine." Under interrogation, the attackers revealed everything. The network funding them, the smuggled messages from Robert and Linda in prison, and the plan to silence me forever so they could eventually reclaim what they believed was theirs. Allen wasted no time. Within days, he dismantled the ring, arresting everyone involved. The web of danger that had surrounded me for months began to fall apart, piece by piece. But there was still one final chapter to write. Robert and Linda's trial for conspiracy was approaching, and this time, with the evidence of their allies' confessions, there would be no escape. I spent the days before the trial reflecting on the life I had lived. I thought about the little children they once were, the laughter, the love, the warmth that had filled our home. Somewhere along the way, greed had turned them into monsters. The day of the trial arrived. The courtroom was packed. As I walked in, I felt every eye on me, but I kept my head high. Robert and Linda sat at the defense table, their faces pale, eyes hollow. They didn't look like my children anymore. They looked like strangers. The prosecutor presented the evidence: recordings, photos, testimonies. My children squirmed in their seats as every piece of their betrayal was laid bare. When it was my turn to speak, I stood slowly, gripping the edge of the podium. "I loved you," I said, my voice trembling yet strong. "I gave you everything. And you gave me poison, lies, and fear. But I survived. You thought you could take my life, but instead, you've lost your own." The courtroom was silent. Even the judge looked moved. When the gavel came down, the verdict was clear. Robert and Linda were sentenced to decades in prison, with no chance of early release. Their allies faced similar fates. The nightmare was finally ending. As they were led away, Robert turned to me one last time. "You think you've won. You'll die alone." I looked him straight in the eye. "No, Robert. I'll die with my dignity. Something you'll never have." The doors closed behind them, and just like that, the storm was over. Or so I thought. Because as I stepped outside the courthouse, a black car rolled by slowly. The driver, a man I didn't recognize, locked eyes with me and smirked before speeding away. The message was clear. Some battles never truly end. But neither do warriors. Because I was ready, always ready, for whatever came next. What final stand will I take to protect everything I love? The answer awaits in the next chapter. The shocking conclusion to my story. This is the moment you've been waiting for. Stay with me, like, comment and subscribe, because the final chapter will leave you breathless. The smirk of that unknown driver haunted me long after the trial. Every night, I'd sit by the window, watching the street outside, expecting that car to return. I had faced betrayal, poison, and death threats, but the feeling of being hunted again was like a cold hand gripping my chest. Tom tried to comfort me. "They're gone, Aunt Margaret. Their allies are in jail too. You're safe now." But I shook my head. Safe? Not yet. Evil doesn't just vanish because a judge says so. There's always one more snake hiding in the grass. And I was right. 3 nights later, just as the moon rose high, I heard the crunch of gravel outside. My heart raced. I turned off the lights and moved to the window. There it was, the same black car parked under the shadows of the oak tree. This time I didn't wait. I grabbed the burner phone and called Alan. "They're here," I said calmly. "Stay inside, we're on our way," he replied. But I wasn't about to sit in the dark while they made the first move. I had prepared for this moment for weeks. The house was no longer just a home, it was my fortress. Every entryway had silent alarms, every corner had cameras, and I had hidden deterrents only I knew how to trigger. Tom stood by the door, armed and ready. "If they come in, we end it tonight." "Yes," I said firmly. "No more running. No more fear." Minutes passed like hours until the car door opened. 2 men stepped out, both wearing dark coats. They moved swiftly, cutting across the lawn like shadows. My cameras caught everything. They split up, one heading for the back door, the other creeping toward the front. I waited until they were inside, until they thought they had the upper hand, before flipping the switch. Instantly, metal shutters slammed over the windows and doors, locking them in. They panicked, shouting to each other, pounding on the walls. From the top of the stairs I stepped into the light. "Looking for me?" I asked, my voice steady as a blade. Their heads whipped around. One lunged toward me, but a blinding flash erupted from the ceiling. Tom's stun device. The man collapsed, groaning. The other tried to run, but the door wouldn't budge. He turned to me, rage burning in his eyes. "You're just an old woman. You can't stop us all." I walked down the stairs slowly, my gaze cold. "I may be old, but I'm the one who taught your leaders how to survive. And survival is something I've perfected." Before he could charge, the wail of sirens filled the air. Red and blue lights cut through the night as Detective Allen's team stormed the house. The intruders were dragged out, screaming and cursing. One of them spat at the ground. "You don't understand. This isn't just about money. They promised us." But Allen silenced him with a shove toward the police car. "Save it for court." When the last officer left, I sank into my chair, my hands trembling from the adrenaline. Tom knelt beside me, smiling. "It's over, Aunt Margaret. For real this time." I nodded slowly. "Yes, Tom. This time it's truly over." In the weeks that followed, peace finally returned. The black car never came back. The network behind my children's madness crumbled under the weight of the arrests. For the first time in what felt like forever, I could breathe again. One morning I walked through my garden, the sun warming my face, and thought about everything I had survived. My children had chosen greed over love, and it had destroyed them. But I had chosen to fight, and it had saved me. I didn't hate them anymore. Pity was all that remained. They were prisoners not just of a cell, but of their own choices. As for me, I had my freedom, my dignity, and my life. The inheritance they wanted so badly. I donated every penny to shelters for abused women and orphan children. My fortune would save lives, not destroy them. Standing under the bright sky, I whispered to myself, "You lost, Robert. You lost Linda. Because love always wins over greed." I turned to Tom, who smiled at me warmly. "You're stronger than anyone I know, Aunt Margaret." I smiled back, tears glistening in my eyes. "No, Tom. I'm just a grandmother who refused to die quietly." And with that, I finally closed the chapter on fear. My story had been one of betrayal, survival, and victory. To anyone listening to my story right now, remember this. Never underestimate the strength of someone who has everything to lose. Stand your ground. Fight for your life. And never, ever let anyone take your light away. Thank you for walking this journey with me. If this story touched your heart, showed you the strength of quiet power, and reminded you to never give up. Like, comment, and subscribe. Your story matters too.